All right, so just to be sure that you guys can hear me, I think I would love it if we drop a message on the chat. I can see we have 3 people on the stream already. So as I proceed, if we have any questions, of course, you can always drop a message on the chat. All right, yeah, I can see your messages now. Sorry about that. I was having a little bit of technical issues from my end. So we're going to be talking about Git and GitHub today. I believe most of us must have used this tool already, but today we're going to be having more like a really technical session. Yeah, so just in case you've not used Git or you've not used GitHub, basically Git itself, is designed for, just probably I would use a very simple form, and I would say managing your source code, right? There are a lot of things you can do with Git, but today we're going to be just taking a quick overview. We're going to work with a very simple Git cheat sheet that I have downloaded from the GitHub education website, and I'll be sharing that link with you as well on the chat. So you can have this and you can follow up with me. All right. Okay, so in order to download this Git cheat sheet, you just have to visit the education.github.com and /Git cheat sheet education. So let me share this with you guys already. Just give me a second. All right, so I believe that will be shared with you. Once you grab that link, go ahead and click on that link. It's going to download a PDF on your mobile phone or your laptop, whatever you're viewing with, and you should be able to follow up with me as I, work with the commands one after the other. Okay, so as I said earlier, Git itself is a version control software basically used for managing your source code. basically used for managing your source code. Sorry, I think I quickly have to close some of these tools. Okay, so basically used for managing your source code. What we're going to do right now is I would first show you how to download the tool, Git tool on your Windows, on your MacBook, or maybe if you're using a Linux machine. So I'm simply going to navigate to gitscm.com. This is the website for downloading Git. So the major difference I want you to understand between Git and GitHub is that Git itself is the tool, right, used for managing the source code, and the GitHub is a hosted version of Git. So basically, what you use GitHub for is to have a way to manage your source code online, right? So you are able to collaborate, you are able to upload your source code to a repository, yeah, so that you can actually manage from any location. And I think the most important reason for doing this is because you don't want to lose your files if something goes wrong with your local computer, right? So I'm going to be explaining GitHub. I will show you how to create an account. I will show you how to perform some of the most important things I think you should do or you should perform when working on a project, right? When working on a remote project or when trying to collaborate with teams. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do right now is to quickly navigate to the download section. So by default, you see I have download for Mac because I'm currently running a Mac. Of course, you can download the version for Windows, you can download the version for Linux, right? So if you're currently on this page and you're using a Windows operating system from Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows 11, this is the option for you, right? If you're running a Linux machine, such as Ubuntu, or maybe you're using Red Hat or even Kali Linux, as a matter of fact, most distributions, you should be able to download that from here. And if you're using a Mac OS, of course, you just have to click on this. Now you can either choose to download this via Homebrew, or you can choose to download this via MacBooks. So it's quite simple. For those of you using a MacBook, just go ahead and copy this link, right? Navigate to your terminal, paste this link right here, and hit the enter key. So I already have this installed, so I don't need to install this again. But basically, that is what you do. And if you're using a Windows machine, it's basically the same step. You click on Windows, and then you select the best fit for your Windows machine. I think most of us will be working with the 64-bit Git, right? So all you have to do is click on this, and it would give you the standalone installer, which is the executable, right? So once you have this downloaded, you just have to, I canceled it by the way, because I can't install this on my laptop. But once you have this downloaded, all you have to do is click on this and it will automatically start installation. Of course, it's going to ask you a couple of questions and you just have to follow the command, the prompt, right? So I think that is quite straightforward. All right, so if you have Git installed, let's go ahead and close this tab for now. So if you have Git installed, we're going to be following this cheat sheet. Okay. So when trying to use Git, I'm going to create a simple, sample project. I'm going to create a new directory and then put in a couple of, files. So let's quickly do that. I would love to navigate to my desktop. And this is the command prompt, right? I'm currently using Alacrity. You can definitely use, any version you have. For those of you using a Windows machine, I'm sure you should be using either your default CMD, which is the command prompt, or PowerShell. And I would also advise, when you install Git on a Windows machine, you have a different bash called, I think, Git bash, right? So if you can use Git bash, I think that would be great because you should be able to follow up with every single command I run here. So let's see, I'm going to zoom this in as well so you can see it properly. And I'm also going to show you Git bash. So I think it comes pre-installed, right? Once you install Git on your Windows machine, you can also try out, I think we have IPA. So I'm just showing you a bunch of terminals I have used. I think IPA is also a great terminal. You can run this on your Windows or MacBook. Yeah, so yeah, we also have CMDER, I think Commander. So these are some options you could try if you want to, try a bunch of other variants, right? When it comes to working with the terminal. So I've tried these tools, and I think they're a great tool. So Commander and Hyper Terminal, right? But my recommendation is, you go with Git Bash, okay? So let us proceed. Right now, I am on the desktop. I'm going to create a new directory. So let's do that. Let's call this Git live class. Okay. So we're going to navigate into that directory, Git live class. Okay, so right now I am on the Git live class folder, and I don't have any file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple file right now. So I'm going to say touch main.js. All right, and let's create another file, touch main.py. So we have two files in here, a Python file and a JavaScript file. Let's see what this looks like. All right, so basically you see we have these two files within the folder. And the next thing we're going to do is to initialize Git on this folder. So the way it works, I think I've seen a lot of people ask this question. They're most times, confused. The way it works is you initialize Git locally, right? And that's what we're trying to do by simply running Git init. Okay, so I believe we can all see this. So by running Git init, we're going to initialize a new repository, locally on our machine. So this says initialize empty Git repository in this location, right? So this is the location of our directory, our working directory. So right now we can see this, hidden folder. Basically, I have this feature turned on, so I can actually see hidden folders. You can do that on your MacBook by pressing the shortcut combination, Command Shift dot, right? So Command Shift dot. So basically Command plus Shift plus dot. Okay. So this is the shortcut I use for turning that feature on or off. If you're using a Windows machine, I believe you can do that from the folder options in your Explorer, and then you can actually show or hide hidden folders or files. All right. So basically, we'll call this dot folders and dot files because it starts with the dot the dot notation before having the Git. So this is currently hidden, but this folder is basically what manages the entire GitHub, the entire Git files, right? So we have a bunch of folders in here. We're not going to go dive into that detail, but basically you can manage all the files from here. Okay. All right. So let's go out of this folder. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to show you a bunch of commands, right? So what do we do now that we've initialized the Git? Okay. All right. So these are some of the, simple stuff we can try. We can check the status of this, repository, this local repository. We can add a file, to the repository. And we're doing that because we want to, add that to our version control system. So basically, right now we don't have any file added to Git. So if I say Git status, so you see we have the main.js and the main.py. Those are the two files we created. The DS store is a default file, a default hidden file on my MacBook. So if you're using a Windows machine, you might not see, you definitely are not supposed to see this when you hit up the Git status. All right, so now it says nothing added to commit, but untracked files are present, okay? So we have three files, basically, two files that we created and one default file. It says that these files are yet to be added, are yet to be tracked, but we currently have these, files in the folder. So the next thing you see, it gives us a hint. We can actually add some of these files to the to Git. And in order to do that, all we basically have to do is to say git add, and then you know put in that file name. So let's say git add main.js, right? Okay, so now we added one file, and the next thing I'm going to do is to run git status again. So now you see it says we still have two files pending, to be added. Basically, one file that we created, which is main.py, because it has added main.js. Right. Okay. So there are a bunch of ways to add multiple files at a time, right? So you can actually do git add with the dot, right? So I prefer working with this pattern if I want to add everything at a time to the repository. So if I say git add with the dots and I use git status, so right now everything has been committed. Everything has been added to the the staging environment. The next thing you have to do is to commit, right? So committing these items mean, okay, I have added this to Git, and I am validating the fact that I have added this to Git. And while validating this, you are going to add a comment, right? The purpose of that comment is to mark the reason for adding this item, right? Basically, you always need to add a comment, something short and something that is descriptive, right? So I can say git commit. You do that with the git commit command, and you say -m, which is for adding this comment. So I can say initialized repository and added in main.py. Okay, all directory files. Okay, I think that's fine. So yeah, so this is the command, right? Git commit -m. So I said initialize repository and added all directory files. Okay, so now it says three files change, zero insertions, zero deletions. And yeah, so we're able to add these files that we've created. This is the first file, main.js. This is the second file, main.py. This is the default file from the Mac OS. Basically, what we do most times is we actually ignore this file. So we'll get to that. All right, so now we've worked with git status, which is just to show modified files. Git add, we've actually done git commit as well with a descriptive message. Okay. One more thing we're going to do right now is let's assume that we have this repository or this folder or directory opened up in a VS Code. So I'm going to alter a single file from here. So let's also zoom in on this to ensure that you can see this very well. Yeah. So on the main.js file, I'm basically going to create a function. So let's just say function, say hello. Okay. All right. So in this function, we're just simply going to say console.log hello world. All right. So now we have a new function in here, and this function basically says hello world using the console.log function. This is JavaScript code base. So I am going to save this file. Basically, I can use Control S, right? Let's just ensure that you see that workflow. So I just save this file. And the next thing I'm going to do is to say git status once again. All right. So now you see Git is automatically able to detect that we made changes to a file, and that file is yet to be added, or is yet to be tracked, right? So the file in itself, I mean, it's currently tracked, but the changes are yet to be committed. So it says use Git to add the file, and use Git add to add the file, and you can also use Git restore to restore the changes you've made. So you see, we also have that option right here. We have git reset basically. So this would unstage a file. We also have git restore, which is what we're seeing here. And yeah, this is just basically to discard the changes you've made. So if we say git restore main.js, so you see that the function is gone, right? Because we used the git restore to take off the changes. Okay, so I'm going to add a different set of functions. So this time we'll say grit. Okay. So we'll just say hi with the message. All right. All that. Okay. So this is another function, and what we're going to do is to check this again by using git status. So now you see we've modified this again. So the next thing we have to do is to commit this, right? So we have to say git add once again, add everything, git commit, and I'm going to use a simple message added a greet function. I made a mistake there, but I'm going to leave it that way. So yeah, so now we have git status just to check. So you see on the main branch, which is the branch we're working with right now, there's nothing to commit and the working tree is clean, okay? So basically that is how you, track these files and commit the changes that you've made. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is to use the git diff command, right? And to use the git diff command, this will basically show you, what has been changed, but not staged. So let's go ahead and add a new function again. So I'm going to add a new function response example. Okay, so something quite similar. All right, so I just added this. So let's say git follow the command here. So git diff. All right, so now using git diff, you are able to see the detail, right? So this is basically what we've added, and this is yet to be committed, right? So you are able to at least use git diff to see the difference between what you've added initially and what you newly added that is yet to be committed. So what I'm going to do is to just add and git commit. So added a new response function. All right. So now we have everything. So we have everything added and committed to the staging environment. So look, if you take a look at this, you'll see that using git diff, we cannot see any new addition to that specific file. All right. So I think we've done enough of that. So we understand how to add files, how to restore or reset files, how to check the differences between the previous version of the file and what you've added to the file, and also how to commit a file. Okay, so another thing that you really need to understand is setting up the configuration for your personal Git account. So you don't necessarily have to create an account, right? But you can configure the instance of your Git installation and set up your username and your email. The purpose of doing this is because when you want someone else working on that file, you want them to be able to see that, okay, so I made these changes, right? I made this set of changes, and this is my username, or this is the username I choose to set, and this is my email. So, just in case, I would say you do that for reference purpose, right? And you can also change the UI color right here. So this is a way to set automatic command line coloring for Git for easy reviewing. We are not going to be doing that, but basically we can set this. We need to, it's not compulsory, but I mean, you need to most times, especially when you are trying to start pushing your code to GitHub, right? It's a good idea that you have this properly configured. So you see, I just ran this command, and it's showing me my already defined variables. This is my name, right? So, and I can choose to change this if I run the entire command and I replace my first name and last name. Same thing applied here. I can change this, but I'm not going to do that. And also when I run this, I'm going to see my username, my email, right? So I can choose to change this to a different email. And this is basically going to set my global configuration, my Git global configuration. So I think that's something you really need to do. The next thing we're going to look at right now is basically setting up a branch, right? So what exactly is a branch? You might choose to have multiple, multiple versions, right? Multiple versions of the same repository. So and you can actually separate this set of versions using a branch. So for example, you're working on a Python project or maybe a Node.js project, and you choose to have a different branch for development and a different branch for production, right? Or a different branch for staging. You can actually create that. Let's go ahead and do that, and I'll show you how it works. So basically, what I'm going to do is to run the command git branch, and I'm going to add the name of the branch I want to create. Right now we have the main branch, which is what you see here, right? So we're going to say we have a staging branch. Okay, so let's just run the git branch. So now you see we have the main branch and the staging branch. Okay, let's go ahead and close this. What I'm going to do is to switch to a different branch, right? So basically you can switch to a different branch using the git checkout command, right? So what we have to do is that in order to switch to the staging branch, we're going to simply run git checkout staging, right? So git checkout staging. So right now we're currently on the staging branch. As you can see, that has changed. So just in case you don't get this kind of view, it's because I am currently, my terminal is currently customized to show me this kind of detail, but you don't necessarily need to see all this. Once you are in a different branch, I think you would definitely take note of that because, yeah, you can add some files to a different branch and you don't have those files in the previous branch. And we're going to work with some of those use cases. I will show you some examples. Right now we are on a different branch. I can also switch back by using git checkout main branch, right? So you see, I'm back to the main branch. Okay, so in order to make this even more interactive, I'm going to turn on what we call the the fish prompt. So currently I'm using, by default, I use bash, right? But we have a bunch of prompts. We're not really talking about that. If you want to learn more about command lines and, working with a terminal or working with bash, I actually have a course coming up soon for that. So yeah, just ensure you keep tab of that on our website. All right, so I'm currently in the main branch. So I'm going to switch again. So git checkout. Okay, and staging. All right, so back to the staging environment or the staging branch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file. So let's say I'm going to call this new file.py, right? So if I should check the list of files I have here, I have the main.js, the main.py, and the new file.py. All right, so what I'm going to do is to say git checkout main. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So you see, we still have that same file. And what I'm going to show you right now is that I'm basically going to, add that particular file that we added, right? I'm going to add that file to the staging environment. I'm going to commit that file. Then I'm going to delete that file from one of the, one of the branches, and then you can see the difference, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Let us first, open up the new file in the main. So let's open up the new file, and I'm going to say function. I think that was a Python file. Okay, so def hello. All right, if I need that. Okay, I think I'll prefer to make it easy for all of us. I'm going to edit that file in VS Code. Okay, so def right and hello, and I'm going to just simply return message. Okay, so we just have a very simple function to return any message you pass in here. I have that saved, right, with Control S or Command S in my own case. So I'm going to say git status. So right now you see we have a new file. This is yet to be added. So we can say git add new file, right? New file.py. Let's check the status again. Yeah, so this file has been added and it's yet to be committed. So let's say git commit added new file. Okay. So if we check the status again, so we don't have any file and the working tree is clean. All right, so now that we have this file in here, I'm going to say git checkout staging. All right, so now that I just checked out staging, you see that that file is gone. Okay, let's do that again. Let's say git checkout main. you see we have that file here once again. So this is the file we just created. We committed this and we've added this to the main branch. But when we decide to move over to the staging environment, you see that that file is not here. Basically, because that file is not found within this branch. The operations performed was on a different branch. And if you want to have that in here, you can simply say merge, right? So by running git merge main, we're actually merging the data or the set of files and changes that we have in the main branch into the staging environment. So right now we are on the staging. After merging this, you see that we can now see the new file, right? So we've merged this particular file from the main branch down to the staging branch. So I believe you understand that. All right, so and this is how you do it. These commands that I'm using are currently on this file. So if you, and I believe this link should be shared with you. So if you can, follow that link, I believe you should be able to, right? I believe you should be able to follow through on this command. So the next thing is git log. Git log is basically going to show us, the log of the actions or operations we've performed so far. So if I say git log, you see we're able to see some of these actions. And yeah, I'm quickly going to take that off. But yeah, you can see the logs, the log of those actions you've performed. And I think that is basically some of the things you would perform, locally. We have a bunch of advanced, commands. I would not be showing some of those advanced commands here because I think it might sound a bit, technical. Things like rebase, we have a bunch of, I'm going to show you how to basically clone and, push or pull from a remote repository once we start talking about GitHub, okay? And you can actually use a bunch of these other commands like the git rm for removing a file or for deleting the file completely, right? And so I think basically what you do with the git rm is you take it off from the stage, right? And you can also use the git mv, which is for move, right? To move a particular file from an existing path to a new path. So we still have other advanced commands such as git stash. We also have git rebase, as I mentioned earlier. The reason why I won't be touching on this is because we have limited time, so we need to quickly start talking about GitHub and cloning or pushing code to the remote repository. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm currently opening GitHub on my browser. I'm currently signed in, of course, as you can see. But you need to understand, as I explained earlier, that GitHub itself is just an online repository where you can push this code or the files you're working with into, because you want a situation where you have a version of the code on a remote repository, or I would say on the cloud, to avoid the data loss if anything happens to your physical or local machine. So right now we have basically this is GitHub, right? So github.com. The next thing you would have to do is to create an account. Let's do that on a private tab. So GitHub. So this is what you see by default, right? This is what you get by default. And the next thing you would have to do is to sign up if you don't have an account. If you already have an account, you just have to sign in, okay? So let's assume you're trying to create an account. So sign up, what you have to do is follow the prompt, put in your email, put in your username and your password. Okay, so enter your email. So let's assume we're trying to create a new account, johndoe@gmail.com, then you follow through, put in your password. I'm not teaching you how to create an account. I think it's fairly straightforward and you can do that, right? When you're done creating an account, you have to verify your email via your email app, right? Open up your email and you would get a notification or a message from GitHub asking you to verify your account. Once you're done with that, the next thing you would want to do is to sign in, right? Okay, so the next thing you would want to do is to sign in, and it's quite straightforward. So all you have to do is put in your email password, and then you sign in, and this is what you get. All right, so I'm just going to take a break for 2 minutes, and we'll continue from here. I would show you how to clone your repository and how to push your code to your repository in the case of creating a new repository. So be patient, and we'll be right back. All right, so let's pick up from where we stopped. And yeah, so thanks guys for staying on the call. So the next thing we're going to be looking at right now is, now that we have an account, we have an account created right here. So now that we have an account created right here, what we're going to do is to first create a new repository, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click on the new button right here, and it's asking us to create a new repository. And of course, you can select a template if you have a predefined template. I'm not working with templates. Okay, so I'm going to put in my repository name. I'm going to call this GitHub test repository. Okay, so GitHub test repository. So it says that this repository name is available, and this check is actually happening within my account. So I can't have two repositories with the same account with the same name under my account. So the next thing I'm going to put in here is a description. Of course, I can create repositories with the same name in multiple organizations, right? But now looking at the owner is my account, Solomon Marvel 97. So this is what I have to use, right? And ensure that it doesn't collide with any other previous naming convention. Okay, so for the description, I'm simply going to say this, Git learning tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to leave this repository as a public repository. And the reason for that is because I want it to be open so that anyone can have access to this repository if you access my account, right? On the other hand, I can actually create this repository as a private repo. Making it private means it's only accessible to me, and I can only set, I can give permissions, or I can actually add more people to the repository myself, right? So it's not public and no one can see it. But for this first example, we're working with the public option here. You can also choose to initialize the repository with a README file if you want to. A README file is basically a file that describes your project on GitHub, right? I'm not doing that here, but yeah, you can definitely do that. And I think it's a good idea to always have a README file in your project, right? So that anybody cloning your project can always, read that file and understand, more like have a brief of what you're, trying to do or trying to achieve with that project. The next thing you're seeing here is a git ignore file. A git ignore file is basically used to set some of the files that you want to ignore while pushing the code to GitHub. So I think while I was reviewing some people's code base for the training effort for our cohort training, I discovered that most people pushed node modules, which is something I've always warned against. You don't push node modules to GitHub, right? It's a waste of your data. It's not needed on GitHub. Any developer cloning your code is definitely would have to install the packages. All you need is probably your package file and your source files, right? Your main code files. You don't need, if you're working with Node.js, you don't need node modules. If you're working with Python, you don't need your Python, virtual environment files, right? You don't need that. You don't need those folders. Okay. So same apply to other software, other languages or frameworks. You don't there's some a bunch of files or directories on your code base that you probably don't need. So you always have to add the name of those files on a git ignore so that Git can ignore those files when trying to push to your remote repository. All right. So if I am working with a Node, for example, and I'm working with Node modules, I can definitely add Node modules by just selecting Node. So when you select Node, it's going to automatically create git ignore, and then it would add Node modules by default, right? To add Node modules to the list by default. So these are a bunch of marketplace app I have installed. These options are not really needed, so you don't necessarily need to grant this set of files. You don't need to really grant access to this set of files, but I have it here by default. So I'm simply going to create the repository. All right. So now I have this repository created. I added the git ignore file here, but what I'm going to show you right now is let's just talk about the environment here. So what do we have basically? Of course, these are the main features that you can work with, right? So we have the code, which is the first thing, the first tab. We're currently on that tab. So this tab is going to show you the set of files, and also the commits, all right, with the description of that commit right here. This is to show you that we only added the git ignore file. So basically that is the default commit. We've not really committed any code in here from our local environment, right? But this is what you see. Okay, so we have one branch by default, which is the main branch. Let's go back. All right. The next thing here is the issues tab. Basically, when working with your team, anyone can create an issue on your repository, and you can see that issue, or you can even create the issue yourself. So basically, an issue is a way to track to-dos or bugs or even feature requests on your code base, right? And when people create an issue to showcase that there's a bug on your code, the next thing you have to do is to resolve that issue, okay? And that's basically what you use this tab for. So just a quick description. For the pull request, someone can actually clone your code or fork your code. They can actually make changes or add some extra code base to your project, and then they can make a pull request telling you that okay, we added this, we did this, and this is kind of like our own our own part to play on your code base, and this is it. If you wish to add it to your main code, that's fine, right? So it's up to you to then decide to add that particular set of code or set of changes to your main code, and that process is basically called merging. So you are merging the pull request. Okay. The next thing we have here is actions. We refer to this as GitHub Actions, and this is a simple way to set up workflows. You're setting up workflows or some sort of pipeline. Most times we refer to these as CI/CD pipelines or CI/CD workflows. So you are trying to add a bunch of feature to say, okay, when someone push to this repository, or when someone create a pull request, or when someone perform this kind of action on this repository, go ahead and run this, or go ahead and do this. Okay, so that is what you do here. It's a bit more complex than I just explained, but of course you have some easy or simple workflows you could set up, right? Things like running your tests. So let's assume you have a test code in your code base. You can simply set up something as simple as running your test on GitHub before pushing or before accepting the new push that you just made, before accepting that push and merging it into the main branch. GitHub Actions would run that test and ensure that your test runs successfully before adding that to your main code base. So it's quite simple if you want to do simple stuff. If you also have complicated or complex workflows, you can definitely implement most of them. So let's assume you are a developer who wants to deploy to Amazon ECS, right? Which is the container Elastic Container Service. So you can actually use this specific templates, right? So all you have to do is to configure that new workflow, and when you make a new push, you can configure the workflow to automatically package this and push it to your Fargate or your EC2 instance, right? So I think this is not if you know what you want to do and you have a previous experience doing that stuff, I think it will be easier for you to use a specific action here, or we call it the app action, to perform that to implement that workflow. All right, so we have the project tab, and basically this is what I would refer to as a simple project management solution on your repository. So you can create a new project. And manage that project alongside with this repository in there. So basically, it gives you an environment, where you can create things like you can create a Kanban board. You can manage your project. You can add teams. You can add your teams. You can actually assign tasks to your teammates and all that. I think maybe we should just go to the project tab and show you an example. So by clicking on that, it brings me to my project tab. And what you can do is you can create a new project from here. So you can create a new project and you can structure your project to look more like a table or a board. Most times I work with the board option. If you have experience working with Trello, then I think this is something you should understand, right? So you can create a new project with this template, and what you can do then is rename this project, and of course you can add multiple views. But on this view, we can begin to create some tasks, right? So you can rename these options here, and basically you can add new items. You can say create new projects, or probably create authentication workflow. Is that going to work? So let's see. All right, so create authentication workflow, and this is a draft, of course. You can convert this to an issue. You can archive or delete this from the project, and of course, when you start working on this, you can move it from one level of progress or step on your Kanban board to the other. So we are not really going to work with this. I'm just showing you what is possible from your Git, from your repository. All right, the next thing is the wiki, and basically the wiki here, as described by GitHub, it provides a place in your repository to lay out the roadmap of your project, right? You show the current status and document your software better and together, right? Because of course, GitHub, as a GitHub user or repository, one of the major things that you're looking out for would be collaboration, right? If you want to collaborate with others. Okay, so on the security tab, GitHub would, the GitHub software would actually run through your code base to tell you, using depender bots or dependency bots, to tell you if there's a problem in your code, or if some of the plugins or libraries you use are already vulnerable. yeah, so it detects the stuff. For example, most times you might have seen, if you have experience on GitHub, you might have seen some messages that maybe libraries like Axios actually pose a threat on your code base. So the next thing it might ask you to do is to probably take it off or use something better. Gives you some kind of security advice on what to do next. And you also have insights, which will give you a detailed insight of your code base, right? So for the merge pull request, for the open pull request, right? For the closed issues and the new issues on your repository, long term, you have these details show up here. You can also see the list of contributors, the community efforts, and the traffics you're getting. The amount of times the community members have forked your code and more like cloned your code to their repository, right? And finally, you have the settings tab. You also have a bunch of other options here. When people fork this code, you get that counts, right? When someone star your code, which is basically saying, this code is impressive, it's nice, I want to give this guy a star. When someone star your code, you see that option here. When someone choose to watch your code or watch the activities of your repository to, monitor your progress, they can also, watch the repository, right? And on the settings tab, you can actually add collaborators. You can set up your moderation options. You can, set up or check out your branches. You can add tags. So there are a bunch of things you could do here. You could set up code spaces, which is the cloud option for working on your code base, right? So you could actually also set up pages. If you have heard of GitHub pages, you could actually set up like the websites. A simple website from the project. We won't be going into that detail, but hopefully in the future we'll do that. All right. So basically, there are lots of things you could do here. In the danger zone category, you can change the visibility from public to private. You can transfer the ownership of your repository. You can archive this repository, or you can even delete this repository. So you can, try your best to check that out. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to delete this repository and we'll create a new one. So in order to delete a repository, which I think is an important thing for you to also learn to do, because you might find yourself doing that most of the time, all you have to do is to type, click on the delete this repository button, and then, type in this exact name, because, this is just a way to ensure that you know what you're doing and you really want to delete this, right? So from the instruction, you see, I understand the consequences, when I delete this repository. So I just did that, and I just deleted the repository. All right, so I'm going to create a new repository, and let's do that again. So git training test. And I hope the spelling is correct. Git training test. Okay, so simple git training example project. All right, so this is still public, and I'm not going to add the README. I'm not going to add either of these templates. I'm just going to create a repository. So when I create the repository without adding any file, I just want you to see this. It shows you a quick setup guide on how to, that's if you've not really done this before, it shows you a quick setup guide on what you could do, right? So you could actually run this code to create the README file locally. You can run this to initialize the repository locally, right? We've done that already, so we don't need to do that again because we still have a Git file. Git status. Okay, so there's nothing to commit right now. We're currently in the staging environment. Let's just go back to the main environment, so or the main branch. So we're currently in the main branch, and what I'm going to do is to add the README file by creating a new README file from here. So I just created a new README file, and the content of the README file is the Git training test. So if I do the cat readme.md, you see that this is the content we have, right? Git training test. Okay. The next thing I want to do is to add that file to the staging environment, and then I'm going to commit that file. This time I'm not going to say first commit, but instead I would say added a README file. Yeah. So I have that README file added. And of course, the next thing you want to do is to commit, right? So the next thing you want to do is to probably set up a branch or set this branch as a default branch. So we are simply going to do that. We already have that branch as our default branch, and then we are going to add the remote origin. So this repository is basically our origin. It's basically our remote, origin. So what we want to do is to add that origin to our local repository using this command, right? So I'm going to add that in here. All right. So that has been added, and the final thing I have to do is to push this code to my main origin, right? So by using the git push -u origin main, this is going to push this to the default and the main origin that I have set right here. So you see that this did not take much time because I already have, it's a simple project, right? So, and we don't have much files. So the next thing you want to do is to verify if this was really added in here. So let's go ahead and refresh this page. All right. So I just refreshed this page, and as you can see, we have this item, which is the main branch, and we have these files. I can simply use the git ignore file to ignore this specific file because I don't need it, but we did not do that. And of course, you can see the time for our commit, 39 minutes ago, 1 minute ago, which is when we added the README file, 33 minutes ago, and the rest of them. So you can actually extend this by adding more more files, right? So you can add more files. And I think one thing you should know. So I think one thing you should know is that uh, you can actually clone this, this repository using multiple ways, right? So you can clone this repository by simply using the HTTPS, way of cloning this repository. So what you basically have to do is git clone, and you can put in this repository. So let's do that. I'm going to copy this. Of course, you can download this if you want to, but let's work with the git clone command, right? So I'm going to create a new terminal. All right. So let's go down to the desktop, and we're simply going to run git clone. Okay, so now we will paste that URL, and this is going to clone this to a folder called git training test. So I can simply navigate to git training test. All right, and now, ls. So now you see the files. So this is a different folder or a different directory on our desktop, as compared to what we had initially. Okay. All right, so I was informed that the voice is not really clear. So let me try to fix that. All right. Yeah, so please let me know if this is much better. Okay. All right, so let me know if this is much better. Okay, apologies for that. All right, so the next thing I would want to do right now is now that you've seen how to clone this using the HTTPS option, you also have the SSH option. We're not going to be trying this option because basically we would use this option most times when you're working with a remote server, right? So I would have a different session where I teach you how to create a server, probably in the Linode engine, and then we push our code to Linode, right, or the server we push to GitHub, of course, then clone on Linode or maybe on a droplet or an EC2 instance on AWS, but that is something more advanced. You also have the GitHub CLI option, which is something I would create a workshop for, because I think it's very important that you also learn how to use the GitHub CLI. It has an easier way or an easier interface to communicate with GitHub, right? So all you have to do is install the GitHub CLI, and then you use the GitHub command to perform some of the operations that you would want to perform. I think long term this is going to be the standard way of doing things because the CLI is actually built in such a way that it makes it easier for developers to communicate with GitHub. And then the other option is to use the GitHub Desktop, which I'll be showing you, very fast. So now we have been able to push our code
and we have been able to also clone the code using git clone. One thing we would definitely want to do is to push or pull the code base. So let's assume I add a new file to the main branch. So I'm going to simply say touch JavaScript class JS, right? And I'm going to open up that class. So let's create a simple person class. I think that's, yeah. We have a constructor name, this again. Okay, so we have something as simple as this, static print name. Okay, so of course, this is not something complex at all. This is a very simple class, to just create a new person with the name as an attribute, and of course, also create that name with this static method. All right, so now that we have that, I think the next thing we can check is our status. All right, so let's add that. So we're adding the JavaScript class. Okay, and the next thing we want to do is to push, right? So we can actually push this. I think we're yet to commit this, right? So we're yet to commit this. We only added it, but we have not committed this. So let's cancel that operation and we'll say git commit /m added a new JavaScript class file. All right. So let's push this right now to the. So we're pushing this right now to our origin or our remote origin, and the next thing we can do is to verify, by simply refreshing this page to see if our file was pushed. And of course, our file was pushed right here, and the content of our file, the class, is right here. Okay, so now that you have this content, of course, if you have a different repository, like what I cloned the other time, I can simply, you see, we don't have that file in here, so I simply do the git pull, right? So git pull is basically going to pull down the changes, on that repository into this new directory that we created the other time. So if I go ahead and use the list command to say we currently have the JavaScript class file pulled from that repository. So yeah, so I think this is a fair introduction. We have other operations we want to perform, like setting up the pull request and all that. I think that would be better shown to you in a different workshop, so that we can save enough time. The last option I would want to show you is the GitHub Desktop. So of course you can download GitHub Desktop. Let's quickly do a Google search, GitHub Desktop, and yeah, so we're simply going to navigate to the desktop.github.com, and by default, I have download for macOS. But of course, if you're on a Linux, I don't know if this is available on Debian variants of Linux machines or Linux OS. So you can check it out. I think it might be available. So please go ahead and check it out you can check it out for Debian Linux OS. Also, you can download this for your Windows. If you're using a Windows machine, you will definitely see download for Windows. For myself, I just have to click on download for Mac, right? And the download will begin automatically. I already have this downloaded and installed, so I don't necessarily need to do that on the call. But of course, I think you can download for Windows, and if you cannot download for your Linux machine, I believe you can probably get, I think you can get an app instance or an app image, alternative on the Snap Store for those of you using a Linux machine. So you can check it out. And if you still have issues, you can ask on our Discord server, and I will definitely assist you with that. So yeah, so now that I have this downloaded, I think I will just go ahead and open this up. So I have a GitHub Desktop somewhere around here. So if you find it difficult to work with the command line interface, you can always use GitHub Desktop. And even if you enjoy working with the command line interface, I think a lot of people will definitely sometimes just feel like having a GUI to to navigate and see what is going on within their repository, right? So what I'm going to do is to first, you can clone a repository from here. You can also add an existing repository, which is basically what I'm going to do. So I'm going to add an existing repository for my desktop. Let's look out for the Git Live class. Okay, let's open this up, add the repository in here. So of course you can see we can review the history, right? What we've done so far. We can review that from here. We can also see the changes, if there are any changes on this project. So let's assume we say, let's do this. On the main.js, I'm going to create a class instead. I'm making a change right now. So human class, and then I'm simply going to create a constructor. And I'll say name, or probably first name, last name, right? And then I just have the first name equals first name, and this is the last name equals last name. Okay, and I'm simply going to have another static method. Let's also do this. So I'm going to say exports module exports class, right? Okay. So of course this would not work until I set up a probably a node project. So I have static hello yeah, print human details. All right. And maybe I'm accepting some sort of message here. I don't know. So I can just say return. Okay. If I can take this off and simply return, so we can have just the first name plus. Of course, you can use string literals for this, right? So this is the last name. Okay, so we're just returning this item like this. So if we go back to the GitHub Desktop, you see that those changes are spotted in here automatically. This is the previous item or the previous details you had on this file, and this is the new content of this file. Of course, you can still, let's close this for now. You can still check this using your Git status and also your Git diff, right? So this would also show you some of those changes. But yeah, if you prefer working with this, I think this is also fine. It's kind of an easy way to check out your the changes you make on this project, right? So of course you can add this file. You can currently add this file, and you can even add a description. So you can say updated main.js file, right? And then you can say we changed or we removed. So let's zoom in on this. Okay, we removed the functions, and added a simple human class with a print human details method. Okay, so can commit this. All right, so what happens is that this was added and committed automatically, and right now it's asking you to push this to the origin, because by default this was not pushed, right? What you've done is you've added this to the staging environment, and you've also committed it. So if you check, you see we still don't have that change in here just yet. We still have the functions until we push this, and this is pushed in such a simple fashion, and we can of course refresh this. So when you refresh this, you can then click on the yeah, that is the wrong main.js. Okay, so you see we have that class, right? And right here you also see the name of the commit updated main.js file. All right, so basically you can still view your history, right? You can view the history of what you've done, and then you can also see your branches. You can switch, yeah, the branch drop down here. You can actually switch to a different branch, or you can even create a new branch if you want to. You can also set up a new pull request, and you can also preview the pull request you have here. So all you have to do is click on create a pull request, and this will definitely take you. This would publish. We already have this branch, but it's yet to be published, right? So now that we are on the staging branch, trying to create a pull request, is asking us to first publish this branch. If I click on publish branch, it's going to publish this branch to our GitHub online repository, and then we'll have that branch show up here, right? So for now, we only have one branch. So if I publish this branch, by simply clicking on this. So remember that when you download the GitHub Desktop application, you definitely need to sign in, right? I already signed in and I already have this account or this application installed for a long time now. So yeah, so now basically what is going on is we can go back to let's go back to our code base. So you see we have 2 branches, right? We can easily switch across those branches because we simply publish that branch, right? Using a GitHub Desktop. So you can also fetch origin is just going to fetch, if you have any changes in there, you can actually fetch that origin, and then also to fetch those changes and to ask you to pull those changes if you want to, right? Yeah, so it's this is basically some of the basic things I think you need to understand. If you want me to set up a different session where we'll talk about some other complex things you can do with Git and GitHub, do let me know. You can also join the Discord server, remember. And if maybe this is your first time to have a session here with us, I did not introduce myself, from the beginning of the class, but of course, you can check out my website to know more about me, and you can also check out, so solomonmather.com, my website. You can also check out topuniverse.org. If you have folks that are interested in, learning tech for free, coming into tech, of course, they can join our free bootcamp, right? Which is the next bootcamp, of course, starts in next year. So we are still currently in the core 2 training. I think we're already approaching the project period. So what we do is we train you, and then for free, completely for free, in the course program, and then we ensure you work on a project where you collaborate with multiple teams. And after the project, we also give you hints on how to land your first remote job or internship roles. And we also have more things we're working on. So you can feel free to check out our website, and also join our Facebook or Discord community. And also, if you're currently on the current training, always remember to appreciate some of the instructors that have taught you so far, who we refer to as our community heroes, right? So ensure you do that on LinkedIn. Appreciate them on LinkedIn, so that just to show that you really appreciate the efforts they've put into teaching you this far. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for joining the session. If you have more questions, of course, you can definitely drop your questions on the Discord community, right? And you can communicate with me. Visit my website, book a session with me if you want to discuss something important. By the way, also you can chat me up on the Discord server. I'm always active on the Discord server, and I will definitely take your questions and answer you as fast as I can. Okay, so do have a wonderful day, and I think that will be all for now. So I'll see you in the next stream, or in the next session, or the next event or bootcamp, or even a workshop that we have. Okay, so have a wonderful time, and bye.